Welcome. I am Len Carden. I'm the Vice Chair of the Arlington School Committee. Our Chair, Dr. Allison Ampe, and Superintendent Bodie are both at the Touchdown Club dinner and will be joining us in progress. So I believe our first item is the public hearing on school choice. There doesn't appear to be anybody here to speak on that, so I will vote to close the hearing.
Motion to close the hearing.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I move that the district reaffirm its policy not to admit non-resident students under the terms and conditions of the inter-district school choice law and inform the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education of our decision.
Great. Is there any discussion? Mr. Hayner?
Or possibly a second.
I don't, do we have to make any allowance for our contract, or is that separate from this?
No, this is under the school choice provision.
Okay,
Yeah.
because you used the word non-resident. That's fine.
Under the intra-district school choice.
I'll second the motion.
Yeah.
All right. So this is an annual vote that we take every year, based partly on the number of spaces, which we don't have, and it's required by law. So all those in favor, is there any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you. All right, and they're also, I didn't do the art, so let me start with the art now. So this month, we have art from the Pierce School. The Pierce School's art program focuses on introducing students to a variety of art-making techniques, as well as introduce students to a variety of artists, modern and contemporary. The goal is to inspire students and demonstrate the wide range of creative possibilities the arts has to offer. The arts curriculum is based off of Project Zero's framework, Studio Habits of the Mind. The Studio Habits of Mind teaches students 8 dispositions that can not only be used in the art classroom, but in other subjects as well. Students learn to think critically, collaborate with peers, and stretch their abilities to gain confidence and reach their full artistic potential. So we're going to start with kindergarten, that's in the back. Not a Stick, Imaginative Drawings. To begin this project, kindergartners read a story, Not a Stick, by Antoinette Portis. The story tells of a pig who uses his imagination to transform a stick into many different tools so that he can have fun adventures. We then talked about using your imagination and how it can help you really push your creativity to its limits in your art. Kindergartners then thought creatively to turn a popsicle stick into an exciting scene with the help of markers. Popsicle sticks then become butterflies, sleds, flags, and other objects in fun, imaginative drawings. First grade, which is over here in B. This is Yayoi Kasuma inspired dot words. For this project, first grade students learned about the contemporary installation art of Japanese artists. Yayoi Kasuma is famous for transforming spaces into fantastical scenes, usually containing hundreds and hundreds of polka dots. Her art can be considered out of this world. So first grade students were asked to consider what kind of world would they make if given a chance. Students then used pencils, Sharpies, crayons, and watercolor paints to create a world of their own. Some created Cat World, Video Game World, Candy World, and Art World, to name a few. To end this project, we talked about repetition and added dots to our words to honor Kasuma and her creative dot worlds. Second grade, C, which is back over here. Henry Matisse inspired still life designs. Matisse was an artist of many talents, but he is well known for his colorful still life paintings full of patterns. To start this project, second grade students learned about pattern and repetition and incorporated these principles of design into their colorful watercolor backgrounds. Second graders then chose from a variety of objects and drew them from observation. When they were done, they cut out their drawings and considered composition by arranging their objects in an artful way onto their backgrounds. Third grade, A, is back over there. Jasper Johns inspired number and letter prints. Third grade students learned about the prints and paintings of artist Jasper Johns. Students then noticed that Johns tended to incorporate numbers and letters into his work by layering them onto his designs. Third graders then created their own background by layering numbers and letters that had significance to them with oil pastels. The following class, students used styrofoam and cardboard to create a stamp, also containing important letters and numbers. Third graders then created a monoprint once the stamp was dry, and used an ink of their choice to print onto their backgrounds, creating a colorful, layered work of art. Fourth grade, also on bulletin board A, observation hand drawings. Hands can communicate a lot without a person actually saying anything. Fourth grade students completed an observational drawing project where they posed their hands in 3 to 5 different ways and rendered them as best as they could. Students could use sign language alphabet to spell out a word, or they could incorporate symbolic gestures such as peace or thumbs up into their artwork. Once they were done drawing, fourth graders cut out their hands and considered composition as they designed a construction paper background with colors and shapes that they felt expressed the hand poses they had created. Fifth grade, which is back in the back with kindergarten E, desert watercolor paintings. For inspiration before we began this project, fifth grade students learned of the elegant and colorful yet simple paintings of American artist Wayne Thiebaud. Thiebaud is known for his still life paintings of deserts and other delicious foods. Fifth graders also created their own desert still lifes by using toy cupcakes as a reference. Students thought about the placement of their drawing on the paper and which point of view they would draw their cupcake from. Would it be a bird's eye view, a side view? Would they crop the cupcake and only draw a side of it, etc.? They used liquid watercolors and add saturated bright color to their drawings. Students finished the project by making a border for their still life containing an illustration of their favorite desserts and sweet treats. Thank you to all the wonderful Pierce artists and to the art teacher, Samantha Castle. All right, on to digital media learning and computer science, Mr. Coleman.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me back. I think I saw you guys a couple weeks ago. I do enjoy talking with you guys, and hopefully I can answer some questions. So a couple things just for the presentation. When I spoke with Dr. Bodie about computer science, one of the things that came up was just the overall program. But in reality, over the next couple of years, the primary shifts are mostly going to be at the middle school. So the presentation, my conversation right now, is strictly going to be about middle school. But feel free to answer questions about how this actually translates and transfers over to the high school. And I'm more than happy to kind of give you guys some information for that. The reality is the shifts at that high school level aren't going to be so great over the next couple of years. It really is going to be the middle school where it's shifting. And the next thing is, feel free to ask questions while I'm talking. I would welcome it. So for this, I just wanted to kind of give an overview of where we currently are right now with our middle school computer science program, and what transitions will actually happen over the next couple of years as Gibbs comes online. We move to a 7th and 8th grade school, and we're shifting things around. So, for those of you unfamiliar, probably about 4 years ago, we had a course called Digital Citizenship. Really, really good course. But what we were able to do is shift it to be much more of a focus on computer science. What we tried to do, and I think we did pretty successfully, our goal was to incorporate the digital citizenship within actual content. And the content specifically was computer programming. We've used historically the past couple of years Scratch as the main platform for the bulk of our projects and the bulk of what we were going for in terms of teaching algorithmic thinking, design, program development just in general. So we are at the point right now where we have a 90-day course that covers a lot of great content for our 6th graders. It meets every other day for the whole entire year. I know I have a statement on here that seems somewhat contradictory, but it's currently offered to all 6th grade students as a mandatory course. But mandatory really translates to us as 85%. We usually hovered around 85 to about 88%. At one point this year, the beginning of the year, was at 87%. Sometimes I'll track those numbers as it's going through. Part of the reason why we don't satisfy 100% of the students, even though that's our goal, is essentially we have a lot of conflicting scheduling concepts that we're trying to satisfy for the students. So it could be language, it could be a math support class, it could be some special ed services. There are a variety of reasons for why we might lose that 15%, but for the most part, we've been pretty successful of really getting around that 85 to 87%, which has been great.
Does it have any effect on those students taking courses later on if they don't take this course?
So that would kind of go into the high school part of it, for computer science specifically. So that's been tracked. But in reality, and this sounds kind of strange with all the shifts that we've been doing, the current ninth graders are the first group of kids that were recipients of the new version of DML. So our enrollment is good, but to be able to make any judgments for a 3-year period, because historically we didn't have anything for 7th and 8th, I don't know if I'd want to make a judgment as to whether or not that lost 15% really was impacted by that. Because in reality, all of the kids didn't have an option for accessing a class in 7th and 8th grade. And that was something that has always been on my mind. And I've probably talked about this before. I've always wanted to close that gap with 7th and 8th grade. That's a big thing. One other point I wanted to make about that mandatory aspect of the course in 6th grade. The reason why we wanted that is, and we still do see this in the high school, equity disparities. Right now, as it is, our high school computer science class still have that national trend of for every 3 males, it's 1 female. We don't see as much of the diversity in our math proper classes that we used to be doing computer science. So a big part for me in the middle school is to make sure that we have opportunities that are somewhat mandatory so we can enculture as many kids as we can and we can actually build out foundation for all students. So you'll see in a future slide that aspect of it being mandatory is still going to be a part of the program moving forward, and then we're kind of moving off there. I don't know, does that kind of make sense? One other thing that, and actually just to kind of touch on this 85% one more time, historically there wasn't really any mandates or any other guidance as to why these courses would be there. And if you're following the national trends, there are tons of states across the U.S. I believe it's actually 48 states at this point that are committed to reshifting or devoting money towards computer science. And a large portion of those states at this point are actually putting in mandatory computer science as a graduation requirement. That might show itself in high school. I know Mass has kind of dabbled around that idea. I'm not quite sure where they are. But the one thing that Massachusetts has done is there are now pretty much digital computer science standards that are K through 12. So what once was something that was a great add-on that we offered is actually now becoming something that we can't really afford not to have in there with the way the trend is going nationally. What we were able to do this year, and this was fantastic, was with scheduling and with the FTEs that we had, we were able to dabble in what this would look like if you were to go into 7th and 8th grade. So we chose 8th grade just for a variety of reasons. We were able to offer just as a kind of a somewhat pilot, seeing how it would work with the schedule, seeing how it would just work overall with the students. We were able to satisfy 13% of the 8th graders. We had a large portion of kids. I think last year when we reached out to students, we had about 134 of the current 8th grade students reach out and request the course. But in reality, we were only able to satisfy it schedule-wise for that 13%, which is about 60 students. So obviously, we had some work where we have to kind of reflect on the schedule and think about how we could actually broaden and create more access. But right now, this course has been going well. We chose at this point, you know, part of it seeing the writing on the wall, we chose a 45-day course. Again, you know, we thought that was a good number of days. There's another little hiccup that often is overlooked with this. Since this is such a burgeoning field, it's not as though units and software and hardware and all this stuff is as readily available or thoroughly fleshed out as it is for other content areas. Like I can, in math, I can go and find 15 programs for elementary school. It's not as though computer science is fleshed out as well. So even for us thinking about a 45-day course, that's a manageable chunk of time where you could probably pull off about 2.5 units. You could do something pretty well in that time, and it's a great little entryway inside of it for us. Questions? So that's where we are right now. That's this year. That's a quick little overview. If you ever get a chance to check out some of those classes, it's awesome. You know, I went inside the 8th grade class a week and a half ago, And Matt Larrabee, the teacher who teaches it, had 3 students in the back who were disassembling computers and learning how to actually put them back together. There was a group of students who were working on another little program with something called a microbit. It was just a cool class where kids were doing and engaging with a lot of different mediums and a lot of different things. It was really cool, really, really neat. So, obviously Gibbs is coming online. So what the heck do we actually do? How do you actually shift this around? So there was always going to be a lot of conversations about actual schedules. So this is where we kind of landed on. To go back to one little point I had made before, I've always wanted to make this a 6th through 8 program. That is something that I genuinely want. One thing that was brought up, Mr. Hayner, like, what do you do for those students, and what happens if you get them in 6th grade and don't have actually any formal parts in 7th and 8th grade? For the most part, we might lose some students just by the fact that there's a gap. And then they get to 9th grade, and we've had good growth in our high school, but honestly, I would like to see a little bit more. So one of the things that we had talked about with this was, how does it actually look in Gibbs? And can we actually take advantage of the opportunity to extend this to 7th and 8th? So next year, we will have a program that's offered to 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students. But we have to have it as a transition year because not everything is ironed out and fleshed out as much as it could or should be right now. And that's totally understandable. We have a lot of obstacles that we have to kind of overcome for ourselves. So next year, I'm going to call this a transition year because, again, there's some unknowns. We have perfectly committed to a 30-day course. Now, I know that seems like a huge dramatic drop-off from the 90-day course, and it is, but it'll make a little more sense in a little while when I kind of bridge the gap. We also have this project block that's going in there. So one of the things that we've always wanted to do is, so we want that 6th, 7th, and 8th grade kind of flow throughout all these years. We'd also like to broach into integrating with other units. So with that project block, or other curriculum areas, with that project block, that's going to allow us that flexibility. So the goal for next year, essentially, is to have a 30-day course that has some of the traits of this year. Obviously, we can't do everything because it's 1/3 of the amount of time, but it's still going to be based on scratch. It's still going to have some of the core lessons. Kids coming out of that may not be as prepared as a 90-day course, but the thing is, they'll have a 7th grade and an 8th grade course to follow it up. And we'll have the opportunity then to potentially work with art, to work with technology, to work with other content areas to do a 15-day project. So what we're looking for next year is 30-day course proper with 15 days where we can actually start to dabble into what that looks like. I'm going to throw this little part in here because this is huge for us. Throughout all the planning of this, it's had a lot of conversations. And for us to shift gears to offer new units, we also need new toys. So one of the things that's been great for us is we put in a grant, I can't even remember at this point, a couple months ago to AEF, one of their expansion and development grants, and we were awarded $10,000 to buy a lot of new technology for us to actually shift the program around. So what you'll see next year, and this is great, is we will have some robots to play around with. We'll have 3D printers to play around with. We'll be able to actually use some of that block-oriented programming. Tinkercad actually is going to play very similar to Scratch. So essentially what we'll be able to do is to take some of those programming lessons and actually create something that's going to be a little bit more interactive, which is kind of neat. Right now, using some of the microbots and some other, we use something called the code bug. They're pretty much just little circuit boards. They aren't as engaging or interactive. They have great uses, but to expand into something else is going to be a great little area. So for 6th grade, we're totally committed, and I can't express my gratitude enough to AEF, the fact that we'll be able to purchase some new stuff for us to add in. Between 95 and 100% of students will have the course. The reason why I can't say it's going to be exactly 100% is I still don't know all of the unknowns. We want to make this as mandatory as possible for 100% of our kids, but it's a new schedule, it's a new school, and I want to be open and flexible. The thing for me that's an overall goal is I want it to be an increase over the 85 to 87%. So I'm shooting for that 95% with a future increase at some point. The way the schedule is structured also at the Gibbs is it's going to allow us to actually maintain that higher percentage of students who receive this. So, you know, a little bit of a trade-off, but we're getting something good out of it. Please.
Go ahead.
Have you guys ever had a Lego first team out of either Audison or like from any of these? Like, have you been able to like expand this to something extracurricular or not yet?
So one of the big things for me, and this sounds kind of weird, This is my 6th year here. I love the extracurricular, but everything I saw for STEM and math was always extracurricular. So a lot of the eggs that a lot of things I've been trying to do is to get it actually more structurally part of our routine and system. For the Lego robotics and all that other stuff, we have much more of a robust infrastructure at the high school, but we were ready for it at that time. You know, at this point, us getting these robotics kits for us in the DML is going to be our first venture into it at the middle school level. But in all honesty, there's a lot of room for growth. Like kind of as I was talking about, in terms of integrating with technology and integrating with other departments, that might allow us entryway inside of some of those things. And I do know that there are robotics clubs at the middle school already, but that's more run by the, I think Brandon Whitney does it for science, I think. I'm not quite sure. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sorry.
I'm seeing a 30-day course in an integrated unit in a project block. My assumption, just looking at it as somebody from the outside, is that the project block would need to come after the 30-day course.
Yeah.
So I'm just looking at that as a school person saying, well, gee, that might be a little tough to schedule.
So you're right. You know, this is part of the unknowns. Like right now, you can create the schedule, you can schedule everything, and unless you live it, it's hard to actually know the ins and outs and how you can go about pulling off some of this stuff. It's pretty much why I wrote would like a 15-day integrated course, you know, but this is a step for us. I mean, this isn't going to be perfect year one. I'm trying to keep that in the back of my mind. In reality, that project block is going to be new for everybody. So even figuring out what you can pull off and how you schedule that is going to be a challenge. So, you know, we're trying to keep our expectations reasonable and manageable. You'll see in year two, I make a more firm statement of what I want. And hopefully in year two, I think we can get there. But right now, we're planning to do this. And we want to see what happens, and we want to be ready for that to be offered.
So is project block going to be one 15-day block within the...
So those kinds of parameters haven't been formally defined yet.
Yeah, okay, I'm just trying to get a sense.
Yeah,
of
no,
how things work.
yeah, that makes it a little bit tougher. Like it definitely for us.
Because you certainly can't go into project block on the first day of school and...
You can't.
Yeah.
And I could say this. I know that that's not the expectation. You know, in talking with Misty Francisco, she has a pretty good idea and a sensible plan for how that project block will be used towards the beginning of the year, and it makes sense. So I know we won't have access at that point, and that's fine. I'm agreement 100% with that. But we're going to try to keep our eyes open and find those times to plug that 15-day unit in if we can for year one.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So transition year for 7th and 8th actually gets a little trickier. You know, one of the things I would have loved is in year one, next year, I'll use year one, where we could have offered an individual 7th grade course and an individual 8th grade course that would help us in our curriculum development. But, you know, right now in terms of a transition, it's going to make more sense for us to access students primarily out of directed study. I want to get into all the nitty-gritty details, but if we were to pull students directly from there without major overhauls to the schedule, we're pulling from courses that have mixtures of 7th and 8th grade students. So it's not as though they're all 7th grade or all 8th grade. It might be 85% 7th grade and 15% 8th grade. They're kind of biased towards certain grades, but they're mixed. And this idea of equity and access is going to be pretty big for me. I want to make sure that this course is offered to all. So what we've decided next year for our year one transition to what we totally want is 45-day course, which is going to be a blended 7th and 8th grade course. So all what we're planning for, this sounds kind of strange, but this is what we have to think through. For next year, we're going to have all students who are coming into 7th and 8th grade course who have had a 90-day background in Scratch. So what we pull off next year for year one is actually going to be kind of greater or more advanced in some respects to what kids will be able to pull off in 2 years. Because any rising 6th grader would have only had a guaranteed a 30-day course. So we're trying to think about this not only for next year, but the following year. So for us, it's going to draw from the directed study. When we draw from the directed study, one of the other costs is, and this is kind of tough, is it creates an unintended consequence of potentially competing with other departments. So what we're trying to do is, for this 45-day course, this is why we kind of chose the number as well, we could pull that off in directed study, but we could also pull it off in a semesterized version as well. So we could actually accommodate students and not make it as much of a choice. We sent around a survey probably about 3 weeks ago at this point, just about interest. And as of 5 minutes before I presented, we have about 195 students who've reached out. We have some students who are part of band chorus orchestra. We have students who are part of other programs. And now with that information, what we can do is build a reasonable and actual good schedule that meets the needs of all the students who are interested, which is great for us. So this is a nice transition plan. It does make it a little bit tougher because some of the things we'll do next year we may not be able to use for the following year, but we're trying to be pretty strategic with how we plan it out. Yes?
So just the band chorus orchestra, so they would miss band chorus orchestra for a semester to?
No, so we haven't worked out the final details, but what essentially happens is there are these 4 semesterized courses: music, art, technology, and FACS. So in working with some of the other departments, we have an entryway in if students are part of band chorus orchestra, we might relax for a single year the requirement that they have to be part of general music.
I see.
So they're getting music in some other fashion, and talking with the performance arts director, Bill, I mean, it was a very gracious offer, and we're happy about that. The plan would be for year 2. We don't have to compete in that way, but in all honesty, it's the best we could do for this year
transition.
in terms of a transition. Long-term plan, 6th grade. So this is where I can be a little bit more firm. This, I would say, is our goal for 2 years. We want that 30-day course. We're opening that. We can iron out as much as we can with that project block. We get that 15-day integrated course with art and tech, and we want that 100% enrollment. And that's a goal, obviously. If we get 98, I'm not going to be upset, but I really want that higher percentage of kids. At that point, our goal is to be a little bit more focused. We will do, obviously, less of the formal scratch, and we're going to branch into the robotics, 3D printing, and really try to pull off that interdisciplinary content, which I think is kind of nice. We could tie it with what's happening at 6th grade. And then long-term to 7th grade, we want those 7th grade electives and the 8th grade electives. So one of the things that we would do is, what's great about computer science is we have some flexibility. If we have some students next year who take this in 7th grade and they get that 45-day background, what we can do in 8th grade is actually make it a little bit more free-form in terms of a project of what they're working on. If you ever go into any of those DML classes, Miss Dash, Terry Dash, does wonderfully with this. Not all the students are working on exactly the same project when you walk through the class. She can scaffold, and these courses lend itself well to really meeting the needs of where those students are. So, in 2 years, our hope would be we have a course open to 7th graders and a course open to 8th graders, and we can find a nice through thread. The goal ultimately would be to create a good background with the habits of programming, develop some of those skills that are important, so that way when they get to the high school, they can access our program pretty readily at their freshman year.
Lynn?
Oh, go ahead.
Hi. Thanks. So my worry is for the long-term plan, because at that point, so maybe a few years down the line, we have this sort of short 6th grade program.
Yep.
And then the option not to take any computer science, right, in 7th
Yeah.
and 8th grade. And my worry, and I know that you share these concerns, is who chooses the computer
Right.
science? Is it mostly boys versus girls because
Yep.
of social issues around that age? And how do we sort of work to make sure that that doesn't happen?
I 100% agree. On this right now, not to say I'm trying to be temper my expectations. Obviously, I have elective enrollment. My hope would be in 2 years we can definitely bridge the gap where it's not elective. Right now, as is, we have a lot of students, the way the schedule is structured in 7th grade, 8th grade, who are in a directed study. And I think there's a great reason for that. My hope would be that we can have access to those kids in terms of it being structured around. My hope would be that, if given the opportunity between directed study and that as an elective, with how popular it's been going, a lot of kids will take it. The popularity that I'm seeing right now with how many kids are saying, I want to take computer science, even if we make it elective, I actually think easily 50% of our students will take it, and we'll work from there. We'll try to build it and try to get as many kids in there.
But then my concern is their gender,
Yeah,
gap.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
If I can make it mandatory, I would love that.
Ms. Morgan?
Have you looked at, to Dr. Seuss's comment, you have a little bit of data of people who have, your 190 or 150 who filled out your survey of a
Yep.
few weeks ago? What was the gender breakdown there?
So I didn't put on there gender, so it's a spreadsheet. I mean, it was a Google form,
Right.
so I haven't analyzed it that way. Right now, all I've done is giving it to the scheduler at the middle school to make sure that those students are being satisfied, but that's easy. I can generate that
It
information
would just
for
be
you.
interesting to,
Yeah.
it would start, if it's 55, 45, I
Yeah.
feel like I can live with that. If it's 90, 10,
Yeah, I
feel
agree.
like way more uncomfortable with that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I could definitely generate that.
Mr. Hayner?
Let me preface this by saying I'm a quasi-Luddite, and the problem is I married a software engineer. These programs that you're having for the children, will they give them a foundation of support to do digital media and things of that nature at the high school level?
So what do you mean by digital media?
Again, this is the Luddite
Yeah.
in me. Being able to, I'm thinking art and doing animation and things of that nature on a digital basis. I know there's software involved in that. I don't know how complex that is. I know there's software also involved in music,
Yep.
and creating digital music and things of that nature.
So this is going to be more habits of what it means to code. If you can indulge me, I'll say a couple minutes about the high school. What we're doing at the high school is we really want to create kind of a 3 to 4 year pathway. We really want those students, all of our students who enroll in this, by freshman year, we have an AP course that some of our freshmen can actually take right now. We have another AP course called APCSA. And then that third year, what we're doing is we're trying to develop a suite of half-year electives that rotate through different contexts. So for example, last year there was a web development course and there was also a Python course. Next year there's going to be a robotics course and a game design course. So we're going to take these suite of courses and rotate them through.
Okay.
Different ideas that we've had, because I think your point's well taken. How do you take some of that glueness factor to the CS and actually translate it to the real world? So we've had conversations about what would this look like from a statistics point of view. If we have juniors who actually enroll in AP Stats and they also have a background in CS and they've taken our 3 years of courses, can we start to develop those half-year courses that are stats, computer science crossover? A lot of statisticians, they're, also programmers at this point. So that is kind of what we're looking at the kind of capstone high school time, where we can actually more flexibly create those half years. And then what we do is we'd rotate that suite of courses every couple of years, so it gives students in their 4 years of high school opportunity to take some of those electives.
So is this a potential foundation, a beginning step?
Yes. Oh, yes, definitely.
Thank you.
Definitely, yes. I should have said that quicker.
I'm sorry, I didn't ask it right.
So yes, just as a comment, I do think as we go forward, we need to take a look at the whole 6th, 7th, and 8th grade schedule, with band, chorus, and orchestra, direct-to-study, and language every day, and all those variables to see if we decide that this is something we need to have as more mandatory, where we can fit it in.
Yeah, I mean, I literally had the conversation at the middle school today with the schedules and talking about what this can look like in a couple of years. I mean, exactly what you said would be my ultimate goal. I would love it if we can get it so all students do this.
Great, thanks. Anybody else?
Thank you for the time, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of
Thank
the
you.
night.
He's doing a great job. This chair is just... You want to move approval of the goals?
No.
So I think we need to wait for Dr. Bodie.
We can do the consent agenda.
Why don't we do the
Consent
consent agenda?
agendas,
I'm a filler, I'm not Kathy,
Well,
but if you'd have me, I can start the discussion, and in case Dr. Bodie comes in afterwards, or do you want to?
just do the
Why
consent
don't we
agenda
get rid of the mundane
consent
stuff
agenda,
out of the
then
way?
we'll go back.
Yeah, and then we can go back if we still,
Yes, we will take it out of order, and,
You're certainly more than a filler.
oh, also, I forgot to welcome our student rep, Theo Rosen. Thank you for being here. Please feel free to speak up with any questions that you have. All right, so the consent agenda. All items listed with an asterisk are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a member of the committee so requests, in which event the item will be considered in its normal sequence. Warrant for approval, warrant number 1H219 dated 4/26/2018, total amount of $584,076.58. Minutes for approval dated 4/26/2018, regular school committee minutes. Approval of the Ida Robbins scholarships presented to the top 2 students with the highest GPA. Approval of the E. Nelson Blake Book Award presented to the top 10 students with the highest GPA.
So move.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None? It's unanimous. All right, do we want to do subcommittee reports or go? Okay.
Out of the way.
So, subcommittee reports and liaison reports. Budget, me. We are meeting hopefully next week, and we will have more to report at our next meeting. There was good news from the Senate Ways and Means budget today. They did fund Chapter 70 statewide a little bit higher than the House. Looked to me about 80,000 more for us. We won't actually get that, but it will roll. Next year, we'll have a right to claim that, so that's good. Next is community.
Excuse me, do you have a date for your meeting?
The 16th, I
Thank
think.
you.
At, right?
Yep.
At 8:35.
8:35.
8:35, yes. That's what you said you could be here, so. if
Oh,
you
good.
Shoot over from grade X, right?
I'll be here at 8:35.
All right, community relations.
So we had our office hours this weekend, and despite sort of several positive comments on social media, we didn't see anybody. So,
We had a good
but there were
conversation.
several comments that people really
Okay.
appreciated
Yeah.
that we held it. And I think this is pretty typical of office hours. And, you know, as a professor, I know you hold office hours. People don't always come, but the fact that you're holding it is important. So, we also have a meeting to schedule about after-school care. And our dilemma, now that I have everyone at the table, is that the time that works most for the after-school people does not work for Kathy. And so we sort of have to, she has a lot of negotiation issues that she's involved in that is after school. So I'd like to move forward without her because we're gathering information that she partly knows already, if this is okay? Okay.
Rodby, there's something, assistant.
I can ask,
We have
yeah.
a spectacular and stellar assistant superintendent who
Okay.
can do anything.
So the date that looks best is May 17th at 6
For the subcommittee?
for a subcommittee meeting, yeah. Would you able
What
to make
time?
it? May 17th at 6 PM. I haven't finalized that, but it's looking, I mean, it looks like the best time.
Yeah, because they're using this room.
We're using this, you're using this room?
Negotiations.
Oh, right, that's why Kathy can't make it. We'll look for something else. I can try to get town hall. Does that make sense, or someplace else?
All right,
We'll talk about it, we'll
Find
figure
a
it out, we'll
room
figure
in
something
the
out.
building
Okay,
someplace.
yeah. Okay,
All right.
okay.
Curriculum, instruction, and assessment.
We meet on Friday, the 18th at 4:30 PM. We're going to talk about three things. The Superintendent Bodie wants to talk about the timeline and the process. It's more of a policies and procedures issue, but we're meeting, so we'll talk about it for the district goals. We're going to talk about the cultural competency goals, so Rod's going to not be there, but he's going to have a more specific goal than what we have before us with metrics in it. And where the third thing is the multi-year plan.
Multi-year plan.
The narrative for the multi-year plan.
Facilities, Mr. Hayner.
And Ms. Fitzgerald doesn't know about this yet. We're going to meet next Tuesday on the 15th at 5:30 in this room, I hope. Okay. We're going to meet in this building. If it's moved, I will let people know.
All right.
You can always get the pit.
Pardon me?
Oh, right.
yeah, so, no.
Not in this room.
So
Use the
we'll find
HR
a place on the
conference room or
6th floor.
something,
We'll
yeah.
find a room. Thank you.
Policies and procedures.
I had a conversation with Mr. Gilbert today. He's going to send us some proposed dates in the foreseeable future. He says we're doing well and we can go on to the next couple of areas. However, he has told me that he is retiring at the end of December and heading off to Florida, going to live around the corner from Charlie Lyons. So He said that we could really do some great work if the Policies and Procedures Committee is available over the summer and can press on. And that'll be up to the members of the subcommittee, but that's
I'm
where we
available.
stand right now. Yeah.
Would it be possible to have some of the policies that you folks have reviewed for us to at least start looking at? And
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
nervous to
the-
get a large chunk at one time.
Understood. We talked about that a little bit. We are moving some policies out of certain sections into other sections. But I think, we'll have to look over the two sections that we're almost completed, A and B, and see if we can bring those separately forward.
He said it's reasonable to expect that C and D can be done pretty rapidly. So that we can then maybe strategically look where there's things that are adjusting as
Yep.
a result of changes in earlier sections, and we can make those changes right away and present them in bulk.
Great.
I just asked that there be enough time for us to read it.
Mr. Chair? Yes, of course.
Enough time for what?
For us to read it.
Oh, yes.
Oh, no.
Meaning that, we get more
There's
than
no
the
rush,
last couple of
yeah.
days, we just sort of, give
No,
us a
there's,
week or
there's
something.
no rush between the time that we have a product that we're gonna send to you and we adopt it, because, if it was an urgent thing to do, we would have adopted it already.
Yes.
So, everybody will have enough time to go read through it and then, explain why we're making changes. There's nothing that, Mr. Carden can confirm this. There's nothing substantively different about where we're landing versus where we've been, with the exception of things that we're really been required to do to update the law. So we're not all of a sudden going and saying our schools should be all painted green or something unusual. It's just readjusting, updating, recodifying housekeeping.
Correct. Yes. All right, legal services.
The chair and I are in communication. I guarantee there will be something in your package for us to discuss or
All right.
deal
great.
with, and this committee should end by the next meeting.
Great. Arlington High School Building Committee, Mr. Thielman.
We meet on Tuesday, the 15th at 6 o'clock here, and we're cruising along. And every week we get a little more information about the different design options.
Great. Any meetings of the
Meeting.
Gibbs Committee's meeting? Okay.
We are on May 22nd at 4 PM.
Where?
I don't know, actually. I think here.
Let's just do it at the Gibbs and just put on a hard hat. And
All right. Liaison reports. Any liaison reports? No. All right. Any announcements? Mr. Hayner.
On Tuesday, June 5th, at the Sons of Italy, Tino D'Agostino, band director of the Arlington High School, will be honored as the Arlington Rotary Club Person of the Year. If anyone would like tickets, please contact me by email.
Okay. Any other announcements? Future agenda items that I can pass on to our real chair. Anybody have anything? Always contact her directly. All right. So let's go back to the discussion on 2018-2019 district goals. I'm not sure
Yeah, so,
what this is, what this document is meant to be, so why don't we start there?
absolutely, thank you. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the document and how the process that we came up with in order to look at the format, because as you can see, the format is different from the district goals, the way that they were presented last year. So, so I just like to frame the discussion and start there. So, in the last couple of weeks, we've been discussing with the curriculum leaders, myself and Dr. Bodie, have been discussing really the process for how we came up with the district goals for this year. And we also, so in having those discussions, it seemed like there was, a little bit of change in the process. And so part of the discussion has been around, the process moving forward and how we select district goals and how we're going to format it, and in a way that it will share with the community, different evidence and objectives. So as we've been discussing this, things have come up. And so we've looked at the goals as like the visionary statement. So if you look at goal 1, student achievement, you know, it's written in a way that's more like a visionary statement. And so this past week, the curriculum leaders met with the superintendent, and we talked about looking at the objectives and what those objectives would be that would fall under each one of the individual goals. So as we discussed it, we tried to also make sure that there was a connection to the work that we're doing, that the curriculum leaders are doing around aligning the curriculum, looking at the state standards, you know, looking at the various resources that we're using to support instruction, and also making that connection to the various things that we did this year, like the transferable skills, looking at the vision statement, looking at the essential standards, and making sure that there's a strong connection, there's an alignment to the goals of the work that we did this year with the future goals as we move forward. So one thing that we wanted to make sure that we were doing, that we were adding on more goals and that we are extending the work. So we're looking at, you know, creating a multi-year plan that over a period of time of 3 to 5 years, that's the way the goals will be written. So looking at objective 1, you see that that's going to fall under student achievement. So we broke up into 3 different groups, and individuals worked on coming up with the language. And we're still, and I still want to stress that this is a draft, so that a lot of the language in there, we want to talk about wordsmithing and making sure that we're not using educational jargon such as Tier 1 instruction, but we want to look at the, you know, when we talk about instruction for all students, you know, how can we term that so everybody understands? So eventually this is going to be on the website, and then people, the community will be able to read the goals and understand the language. So if you look at some of the language there, it's just looking at those objectives and the way that they're supporting goal 1 and still making that connection to the work that we did this year. So for an example, if you look at objective 1.1, you read the language, and at the end, you know, each one of the departments could work on objective 1.1, but choose a different transferable skill that we came up with this year that's in connection with their work. And please ask questions as we move along.
Oh.
Yes.
So I have a question about 1.1. So if you look at last year's, it sounds really exciting, right? Because we have this students as learners, global citizens, you know, it just sounds really visionary and exciting. And I assume that 1.1 here is a continuation of that, but it's
But if you look at objective 1.2.
right, which has part of it, but the vision of students as global citizens, I think, was sort of something that was really exciting to people. And so the question is, where is that gone? Is that sort of no longer part of our mission?
No, of course, it's still part of our, like I said, we're looking at the language, but if you look at objective 1.2, it still is in there. We're talking about becoming culturally competent, but what we want to do is we also want to make sure that we're integrating that into our instruction. So in order to do that, we wanted to make the objectives more of an integration and not looking at it separately. So that's why objective 1.1 is looking at the general curriculum, and then looking at objective 1.2 is that we're integrating those cultural competency skills into daily instruction.
So 1.2 sounds exciting. It just feels like something's lost, that we're doing something that was visionary, and somehow now we're just doing state standards. That's how it feels like reading. It's just some of the sort of sexy words are taken out, so it just doesn't sound as exciting.
Right. And, right.
Yeah.
Well, and that again, this is a draft, so
No, I
you
know. I'm
with your,
just giving you feedback on the draft.
Sure,
It just it
absolutely.
doesn't sound as visionary as I feel that the previous last year's stuff did. And I know that this is. I know there's a continuation of that work. It's not that we're doing something totally different.
Right. So that's, like, again, like I said before, and when I was explaining the work that we've done up to this point, is looking at wordsmithing. So if that's something that's some of the feedback, then we can work together to try to figure out how we can, craft some more, language that is still has that visionary aspect to it, but still able to be understood by, individuals in the community, and not using so much educational jargon. So as you move on, Go ahead.
So just a clarification, your intent is for these to be multi-year objectives?
Yes.
All of them, or just most of them?
Well,
or-
the goal is to make something like an umbrella. So, like, if you look at the objective 1.1, you know, the various curriculum leaders can then go in, and if we look at the format, they can talk about the different selective activities and evidence that each one of them can do, but it can be differentiated. Everybody doesn't have to be working on the same thing at the same time. So we tried to make it broad enough that, you know, and this also goes to principals as they work with their staff to create school improvement plans that are still going to be connected to the district goals, but these will serve as an umbrella. And so then you can be a little bit more specific as you get into the, you know, activities and the evidence that go under the goal one and the various objectives. Okay? And if you want to add anything, does that sound?
No, I think, you know, when we think about multi-year, when we look at last year's goals, they were really visionary,
Yeah.
but then when you looked at the steps,
Yeah.
it was like
Small.
14, and each one was a big deal, and so we were trying to think about what is realistic to actually put things in place
Right.
to actually achieve them. So I think we were trying to make more measured goals that would be achievable in a way that, you know, as an organization, we could work on them step by step as part of the discussion we had.
Right. Yeah.
Mr. Hayner?
When we originally did these goals, they were intended to be broad and to be expansive and to be visionary and multi-yeared, but not necessarily worked, every specific one being worked on every single year, every single line. This seems to have really chunked it down. And I agree with Dr. Seuss that this is where we came from originally. We put there's a lot of time was invested in this, a couple of Saturdays and stuff, and Mr. Thielman worked very hard on the language. I remember convincing us all that statement about global, how important it was, and I still think it is. So I think, Rod, you took it down, you heard us on that aspect.
Mr. Thielman?
Yeah, so my question is this, so these are multi-year goals?
Yep.
So,
Over how many years are they?
so, you know, that's still like work that we're going to, you know, as we move forward. And like I said, they're general enough so that as the curriculum leaders go in and the various departments, such as the curriculum leaders and the, you know, principals, they will also be able to match these goals, and that will be determined by the activities and the evidence. So, for instance, if we goal 1.1, you have the flexibility, so we're looking at 3 to 5 years. Like if you get any good school improvement plan or district goals, you probably want to take 3 to 5 years, and then you have like some smaller action steps that you put in there, but you're going to have some steps to get to that overall overarching goal.
Is there an Excel spreadsheet you're working off of?
Well, so I think the activities are kind of year-long, what we are planning to accomplish in the next year. So if you look at Objective 1.2, they get much more specific, which would be accomplished within a year.
Yeah.
I know that this year there was, you know, a discussion about where are we on the progress towards the goals and wanting to report out. And then, so I think we were trying to focus the activities much more specifically to actual, you know, actionable items that we could then report back on and have evidence
And
of
have
progress
evidence,
and
right.
whatnot.
So at the
Yeah,
end of the year,
so
you-
obviously building culturally competent students is going to take more than a year, yes.
Yes, I mean, what would be great would be, this is how I think about these things is, I'm envisioning an Excel spreadsheet, and I'm envisioning, you know, a column that says objective 1.1, then FY 19, okay.
It's
was in the
It's
one.
is it?
hidden, it's not,
hidden,
yeah.
okay.
It was in
But,
that.
okay, oh, great, thank you, but I have more to say about that.
That's why we're also
keep
asking
going.
for more time.
Okay.
That's why we want to
Okay, good.
meet.
Actually, I can work with this,
Summer.
but I want to tell you what else I'm interested in. I'm actually interested in something at the end of a 3 to 5 year period that talks about measurable outcomes.
right.
So I would love to see that 5th year, so if it's FY 19, 20, 21, say 22 or 23. In FY '23, you're telling us what the measurable outcomes are. So what's going to be different about the students? What's going to be different about teaching and learning? What's going to be different about the district at that time? That's the real important thing. And that informs other work we're doing, which is
Right.
kind of the 5-year planning. So I need more columns.
And I think that was behind some of the requests for more time
Yeah.
than we've, had in the last few years, or just in how that, I know when we
Well, yeah, I didn't-
have them
But I would design it by year, that's what I'm
But
saying.
I
to you.
didn't, right, but I didn't, I mean, I haven't gotten into that part of the discussion because we're looking at the format and looking
Yeah.
at the language and looking at the various
Yeah.
things that were adjusted. But one of the discussion items that, we would like to have with, the school committee is taking more time. So maybe taking the summer to have
Yeah.
getting more input
Yeah,
from teachers and curriculum leaders.
Yeah.
And then so you're going to have more buy-in. So like looking at that process so that we can have more input and have that discussion about, oh, so you'd like to have more columns and how does that look? How is that going to be manifested in the way that we present it? So, it's saying like, okay, we want the goals by a certain date. Like in June, we won't have time to do that. So, I mean, just to take more time to flush this out and have more dialogue.
yeah. But I mean, so I think that it would be good to have a plan year by year. But let's just say you took one specific, let's say for the sake of argument, I don't know, this is probably not accurate, but let's just say that one goal was to align, one particular program in the high school with the state standards, okay? And so maybe year one was to identify the essential standards. Year two is to actually have alignment. And then, the measurable outcome is that we're aligned with the state standards and our students are performing at a higher level. So I think it could be that
makes
specific.
sense, yeah.
Yeah, that specific is how you want to go.
Right.
And that's actually clear for the committee and the community.
Right.
It seems to me.
But that would be reflected in the key activities every year.
Yeah, every year.
But you
And then
want to
that-
see the big picture.
And
I
you
want to see the big picture. I want to
picture.
see like the measurable outcomes in FY '20 or '21. We're talking about the goals. That's what I would want to see. I would want to see the measurable outcomes in the year in which the multi-year plan is thought through.
Mr. Hayner?
Down to 1.2, I get the impression that the way this is written, cultural competent, and the manageable emotions and stuff, they're synonymous. I see, students will become culturally competent by acquiring knowledge, attitude, and skills necessary to understand and manage emotions. Cultural competency is much more than just an emotional state. It's an understanding, it's all sorts of things that go with it. And I don't think this does justice for the term cultural competent.
Well, I think this was actually what we were talking about, was how social emotional learning instills the specific competencies to build cultural proficiency, because part of being able to take the perspective of another is having self-awareness and self-reflection. And so we're trying to show that link, that in order to build a culturally proficient student, you need these discrete
That is
skills.
not clear here.
Okay.
This implies that cultural competency is an emotional state. That's all I'm saying. This is the feedback I'm giving you right here. And
Right.
that it needs more to get across.
And
Thank
that's
you.
the reason why we're saying,
Right.
like, we would
I
like
agree.
more time over the
Right.
summer.
No.
To have these type of discussions.
This is where I'm coming from. This is not negative criticism I'm giving you. I'm sharing this with you.
Right.
Okay, Mr. Seuss, and then I'm going to turn over to
Okay.
Kirsty.
So I think this is a great idea to take more time. I think that, especially if we're looking at a 3 to 5 year process, we really want to be thoughtful and consider all viewpoints and really think, carefully about this. And so I love it. I just wanted to, I have one specific question, and I want to just reemphasize that document sort of serves two purposes, and we should just keep that in mind. One is an internal document of sort of what is our process, what are we doing year one, what are we doing year two, let's check the boxes. But it's also a public-facing document, and in that, we have to really articulate who we are, what we value, what our goals are, where we're putting money, what we're hoping to achieve. And in that place, some more lofty, exciting language might be valuable, right? But because it's both. I mean, because you can then say to a community member, here's who we are as a district, here's what we value, here's what we're working on.
Which, and that's why I'm saying we want to tie it into the foundation that we started with, like coming up with a vision statement and saying this is, but how is that manifested within the classroom? How are we
Right, and I think you
achieving
need-
that goal?
You
So
do need both, and that's
Right.
right. And then I just have a question for the cultural competency. So getting down into like language, what is a universal screener?
Oh, so that would be something that is administered to everyone. So
Okay.
this specifically would be for the social emotional learning as well. So you, and similarly to reading, where you apply a universal screener for academics to, screen everybody for reading, they have
Okay.
them for social emotional learning.
Okay. So this is a one-on-one screening, like an individual assessment?
So we would be researching, investigating, and piloting them. There's several, but typically because it's social emotional learning competencies, they're more of a rating scale that a teacher would complete. Around that would screen like the student risk screening survey, or SRSS is one of those that we would be researching, but those would be, that would be part of the plan, would be to investigate which would be the easiest to administer, yield the most results, and what.
Got it.
which would give us a benchmark, and then we can use that as to set
What are we
goals as we
doing with
move
that
forward.
data?
Exactly, that
Okay.
data.
Mr. Hayner?
I think this is fantastic. I think the process is great. My only concern is that I think we should, and it's difficult to say, start this earlier, because if we're going to be still, if you folks are still going to be working on this during the summer, we come back in September, we're either going to have to accept all the work that's done, which I'm not saying we're not, or we're going to be delaying it more and more. So I'd like, going forward, not this year, it's not going to happen this year, but going forward, to consider starting the district goals process a little bit earlier, because right now, the public's going to have their first input in this coming up on the 18th, and we're going to hear that on the 24th, and then we've got 1 or 2 meetings after that for us to have input, other than next September. So
Early summer.
just something going forward. That's all I'm asking, to start the process earlier. Thank you.
Mr. Thielman?
So one concept, I'm just trying to understand it. Are you trying to, is it a 3-year plan? Your multi-year, is it 4, is it 5? What's the goal here? How many years is it?
It's going to be at least 2 more. We did work this year in each of these areas. But if you look at the curriculum piece of it, you've seen some of the work on that already in terms of the 4th grade, but we want to be able to finish that. It may be 3, we'll let you know, but I think at the minimum, it's going to be 2 years.
Yeah, because I think it will make work easier going forward, the clearer you are about, it's a 3-year plan, and there's measurable outcomes at the end of the 3 years, and here are the action items each of the fiscal years, each of the school years.
Mr. Hayner, can you
better.
pass your microphone down to our student representative?
We won't go any further. You gotta come.
I'm just asking for clarification. What exactly do you mean by cultural competency, and like what goes into that?
I think that's an excellent question. I think many people do struggle with that. People have a different sense of that. And in fact, I think we even have trouble, we're tripping over some of the words. Is it cultural awareness, cultural competency, proficiency? There's just even a lot of discussion about that. But I think at essence, what it is having a deep understanding, first of all, being self-aware yourself, but having a deeper understanding of other cultures, developing empathy, both in terms, and when I say a deeper understanding of other cultures, that's both at the knowledge level and as well as the emotional level of this. Because, we can't go very far from what was the recent events here at the high school, and I can't talk too much about it tonight, but, that's an example where that's not you can see when it's not, for sure, when things happen that are very damaging and to different cultures by language, symbols, and to the extent that we can grow in that and be aware of the impact of decisions we make and decisions we make, things we say, what we do in our curriculum. Does Does every student in our school system see themselves in the reading that we do? There's lots of aspects to it, but I thought that's a great question, and one we also talk about too.
Mr. Carden.
Okay, so to bring you and Dr. Bodie up to speed, we're talking about the objectives in general, not the specific first one, and that the objectives in general are aimed to be 3 to 5 year objectives, although some of them clearly aren't, like complete schematic design for the high school clearly is not a multi-year objective. So it's a little bit split the direction we're going in. It seemed like the intent from what Dr. McNeil said was to create more general objectives that were multi-year and then build in key activities under them. So I think you would need to do that with all of them. So this schematic design plan for the high school would be a key activity under some other objective that you would need to come up with, you know, provide adequate space for our students or something like that, right? Just as a structurally, to be consistent, if you want to go with objectives that are multi-year, then we need to be consistent with all of the objectives.
I hear what you're saying. I think it's a great point for us to consider as we do this. Like, for the high school one, you could just say we want to have a rebuild of the high school, and what are all the different phases. I think that our discussion about the multi-year really has more to do with curriculum, the work we're doing in social emotional learning, the work we're doing around developing cultural competency, and then the professional development that goes in the support of all that. I think that 3 and 4 have a more discrete yearly basis to it, rather than multiple year, though some of them probably could. One of them, as you can see, is the one about hiring, increasing the diversity of our staff. We've had that goal for a number of years, and some years are more successful than others. How do you measure the success of that? You know, is the measurement of the success of the diversity that our teachers have the same relative proportion of as the students to the student population? I think it's important to define. You say that all the time, Mr. Thielman. You know, how do we measure the success? Well, how do you know you're there?
Yeah.
And in some cases, there are very concrete things you can say that you know you're there. And in others, how do we know that we've had an endpoint in our curriculum? I don't think we ever do. I think that is something that's always ongoing.
Well, you can't, you can pick a few measurable outcomes. You can pick some things. I don't know what they would be. I mean, well, I mean, years ago, I mean, one measurable outcome was we wanted to increase the number of AP classes, so that was a real concrete thing. It was a different era. It was a decade ago. So I don't really know, but there could be some measurable outcomes. I don't know what it would be.
I think it's that question is why we need time, a little more time. And we really want to invite you into all of you into the discussion, because you have to be able to say to the community how we're measuring our success in these various endeavors. And we want to be able to, because I mean, if you don't have something like that, then how do you say, well, we've done well?
Mr. Schlickman.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is I agree with Mr. Thielman, and to add on to it, when we go and take a broad category and put goals in there, there's also the question of why is this important? Why did we pick this? Given the data or our look around of where we are now, why did we go and pick this to be something that we're working on? Right. So that we're building sort of a needs statement, or along with that has to connect to the how do we know when we get there. So those are key components of it, and certain things make perfect sense. Is that we have been trying to increase the diversity of our teaching staff, and the reason why we want to do it is pretty obvious. Is that we have a diverse student population, and they need to see that reflected in the people who are teaching them. Completing the schematic design for the high school, we're going to do that anyway, but how do we know we get there and why is it important? Is it the right schematic design with all the input from the community? Will it lead us to the best high school we can have? The whys and the destinations are sort of the most important part of the document, and we've got goals sort of hanging out here, but we need to build that part.
Can I make a comment? I totally agree. In fact, we had a discussion about that just the other day. It's like, what data do we have that is prompting us to say this is what the important work is that we need to do? And, is it just one piece, or is it a combination of things that all point in the same direction? I will say that's actually what's sort of inspiring. One of the goals is that while we have data, what we don't have is a way to pull it all together and make those connections that we probably could do a better job about doing. So, for example, one of the pieces of data that bothered me a lot in the youth risk survey was the percentage of students in the high school that had one adult that they felt connected to, that they would go to. I sort of expected the number was 68%. I expected it to be higher than that. I want it to be higher than that. So yes, you could have that be the discrete goal. That's going to be what we want. So that's your outcome. But what does it take? What are all the pieces that get you to that discrete outcome? And so we've actually had a lot of discussions about this, and we really do agree with you on that. And maybe, one way we actually had a different draft before, which was talking about the theory of actions. But then that creates up a syllogism. If you do this, then that. And
I have poor theory of action.
There's an implicit assumption that syllogism is a true syllogism. But I think to your point, maybe what we should do is doing some preambles here about the whys and why we choosing these.
That's true, but I mean, the thing is, we're going to be devoting a lot of attention. The staff is going to pay attention to what comes out of this. So it creates momentum or attention from the part of the staff. We need to buy into this so that when we do the budget in subsequent years, that we're budgeting to accomplish these ends. And if there are resources required that come through us, we have to be on board for that too. So that's why I look upon this as having those touchstones of why is this important to us? Why are we going there, and how do we know that we've made progress?
Yeah. Can I ask one more? Oh, sure. You want to say that?
Oh, I just have a question.
Dr. Buddy first.
Oh, let me, I actually just forgot what I was going to say. It was something very important, though, but let me just come back to it.
I'm going to do Mr. Hayner first, and then Dr.
On the worksheets at the end of this, a lot of areas haven't been filled in, and I understand why. Can I assume that some of those will have you'll be responsible for them, and they will then translate to being the superintendent's goals? Because I've always had this, we've had this, I don't want to use the word conflict, but discussion back and forth between district goals and superintendent's goals. I see this as a great vehicle for potentially finding common ground in this. So is it a fair assumption?
Let's talk about that.
Okay. And I would ask that to possibly be a piece of the agenda on the curriculum committee.
One of the things that I thought was really illustrative this year, which I thought was a really positive thing, Marion can maybe talk about this a little bit. This year, there was such clarity in the district about what we were working on, more than any other year. And maybe because it resonated with teachers more, I'm not sure. We all knew we were working on social emotional learning and cultural competency. And everyone felt that was the right thing. And in fact, what we want is more to continue to do that work, because it's not something that ends, but also want more professional development and more personalized professional development. So sometimes it's important to be able to take goals and have them come down to some really simplicity too. And so that you have a focus. And I think that happened really a lot this year, more than it ever has before, because sometimes our goals just get so wordy. Yeah.
Oh, just a question. So to Mr. Hayner's point from earlier, it sounds like if we're doing work on the summer, that the members of the school committee or part of subcommittees that are relevant would be involved in this process if they're free. Is that, that seem right? Okay. So it's not that you guys go off for the summer and then boom, it's just shown to us in September. There's potential for ongoing discussion and dialogue.
Right. I think what we need to accomplish by the end of, in June, is the big ideas of what we're working on, because all of our principals need to develop their school improvement plans. And our vision of this from years ago is that we set the district goals, and they have to be umbrella enough that people can get very specific at their school level and specific at their departmental level. So let me give you for example, because we were talking about one of the things we did last year about transferable skills. What they did as a whole team this year was looking at how you do writing using evidence as a transferable skill. We've been talking about that. Every department was able to identify how they were doing that at every range of grades. And it's that kind of everybody oaring in the same direction where you have impact. Now, one of the things that we did talk about, and I would love to have your feedback on this, is that we left goal 1.1 open a little bit in that about transferable skills, and not saying, okay, well, we're going to say it's this particular transferable skill we want all teachers, all schools to work on, but rather leaving it open broad enough that for them to define what's really important in their discipline or in their school that they want to focus their energy in. And it's okay, because all these things have to be worked on anyway. I mean, it's not a linear progression. So I don't know what you think about that. That's what tonight is hopefully about a discussion, and I'm hoping that we can continue this discussion at a CIA meeting down the road.
Anyone? Okay. I'm going to ask my question, and bear in mind I'm jumping in the middle and haven't heard the first part, so I'm sorry if I rework ground already tread. So I had the same question that I heard earlier about objective 1.1, where it says students will become culturally competent. And the rest of it, to me, sounded much more like the social emotional learning. Like, I didn't understand that sentence I didn't see outward, or I didn't see very much outward reaching with the things that the kids are acquiring. It seemed more internal, and to me, either it wasn't cultural competence, or it wasn't, it just, the sentence didn't make sense. I mean, it seemed like two different things stuck in the same sentence, and it didn't make sense. So I know that's already been brought up once, so I'm just flagging it again. And I heard some of what you were saying about how it's trying to make the children understand better, but I'm not, even given that, I'm not getting that goal making sense. Then, bigger picture, actually, let me talk about 3.3 next. That's the multi-year financial plan. I'm just questioning whether that really describes what we're going to do. And it sounds like we're going to be talking about these more, so I'll just bring it up then. But I'm not sure that we're just trying to do a multi-year financial plan. I think we're trying to do something bigger than that, and I don't think this goal captures it. Then the other thing was just, I'm thinking back to meetings in this time frame, year after year, going backwards, where we've been chastised as school committee for not having approved the goals yet, or that we're holding up things. And with the talk about delaying into September, I'm feeling like if we were told we were holding up things before, isn't this just going to be that much worse? And I don't want us to be holding things up. I don't want things not to be able to happen because we said, yes, this sounds, it's fine. Let's take our time on this. So that was my other.
Who's holding us up?
We've been,
Yes.
no, in the
Well,
past.
she's been accusing us of holding us up.
Administration.
Yeah, it's happened at this table before.
We
the
argue with
past.
ourselves.
I'm sorry.
We argue with ourselves.
No,
No, that's not what happened.
It depends. It's depended on different years. It's happened.
some years we have asked questions, and it's taken times to get answers for us, and that resulted in discussions, created more questions. That's one of the reasons I asked to start the process earlier.
Well, I know, I'm just
Yeah,
saying.
no, I agree with you.
Okay,
Okay, I'm just trying, okay,
no,
Sorry.
it has come up before.
okay.
And it just seems like this is taking that to even an extreme. And so if it was a problem before, isn't it a problem now? So,
Hear you about starting sooner. That might be something we can think about for sure. I don't think you're going to hold us up. I think what we're looking to do this year is we want to get agreement on what these are, these objectives. And there may be objectives you'd like to put in here as well. We can talk about wording. What we need to do this summer is to work on this. And we'll certainly work on it before. This is the worksheet that we're going to use
Okay.
for each one of the objectives. And there will be activities. How do you measure the success of them, and then who's responsible? These are internal documents that we will work on. The elementary, all the principals pretty much set up their SIPs the same way, where they have the objectives, the big things, and then what their key actions. And in fact, many elementary schools now actually have it by grade level. If their goal is, for example, maybe the transferable skills, going back to when we did, is evidence. So what's that going to look like in first grade? What's that going to look like in second grade? So everybody is all lined up with what we're doing. So there's a coherency. Now, so what we need to do is have time to work on this. The principals will work on their SIP. They don't approve their final SIP until October 1. But the idea for the teachers is they want to know what the big bucket ideas are. What are we working on? And is there anything that maybe some course or some PD that I want to take this summer? That's really the focus. They do their proposed goals by October 1, and then I think they're finalized by November 1st. So I think with this slight modification, we'll be fine.
okay. And
So-
our teachers will have enough time to get their goals in place and.
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm just thinking about evaluations and, that people have to know what they're going to be working on to make sure that they're doing what they're going to be evaluated on.
Well, we need to know what we're focusing on next year too, because we're already starting to plan the professional day and talk about that. I mean, there's a lot of things we've got to get in motion here. So this work is important, and I actually agree with you. I think we probably should start earlier. It's just that I'm agreeing with you, Mr. Haynes.
Okay. Mr.
So we
Haynes.
probably should start a little sooner.
Going forward with this, the idea of the multi-year, that once it's approved, and it's going to have to be tweaked each year. Some things work, some things don't work, but it'll be less, people will be able to start on these things much earlier than November in the future. Am I correct in that? We're not going to be in this cycle. My concern is, we're in a cycle that we come to some sort of completion in November, and then we're starting to do this all over again come May. You've got 4 or 5 months to work on these goals. So if it's a multi-year thing, once this cycle starts, other than tweaking it, we should be ongoing. And there'll be some deleting, some finishing, some new ones added every now and then. But hopefully, we won't be in a 5-month cycle of doing goals each year. It'll be a full year at least. That's where we've been, and that's my concern. We go through this process. We spend 7 months organizing, planning, and 5 months supposedly implementing, and we're starting all over again. We have to become a little bit more efficient in this, and I think this is a start.
Well, it's not, there's not the cutoffs. I mean, it's not, we keep working on them.
I understand.
But we have
But it
discussion.
we're talking about it today on May 10th. You're talking about final completion and implementation come November. That's a long time of planning. Not that it isn't necessary. I'm not overcritical on that. I just want to find a little bit more efficiency so we can put more time in the doing than in the planning, that's all. And it's easy to say. I'm not one of the people that have to do all the work and have to do the implementation.
Dr. Seuss?
Sorry, I know I'm talking a lot. What I'd love to see is, a couple years ago, we were talking about cultural competency, and we were talking about social and emotional stuff, and there was a question about whether they were the same thing or whether they were separate, and I think the committee felt very strongly that social and emotional learning was not sufficient to cover cultural competency and push to have administrators trained. What I'd like to see is how does this look as a rollout for fully training teachers, right? So administrators have been trained now, but I would love to see the 3 to 5 year plan of how are all teachers and other people who have contact with students going to be fully trained.
Mr. Schlickman?
Yeah, and the other thing is that there are so many goals and so much of this going on. The reason why they're moving targets is everybody's got a different role and a different responsibility. We've got a responsibility to communicate the district. The superintendent's got a responsibility to us. The schools have a responsibility to take whatever they're given and use that in their school improvement planning process. So whatever we have here is got to be able to go on chart paper and let teachers go and look at this is what we're doing well, this is where we're going to improve, and this is what we should do about it. So it always feels so confusing from this level here because we're seeing so many little bits of it in so many different ways, but we really need to focus on ways to make sure it's what's written in the goals that we have a say about are really important and things that people will hold on to and embrace and incorporate into what they're thinking about and what they're doing down the building level.
And improve the life for our students.
Yeah, that's why we're doing it. We're here for kids.
Okay.
I think we're really, I'm really struggling with and I think this keeps sort of coming up, the cultural competency and the SEL in the same objective. Like, I don't even know where to, I can't even start, I can't start unpacking that and thinking about key actions under that. Because like in the sheet, it seems, most of the key actions that I'm seeing under objective 1.2 in here, to me, look more like SEL than what I think cultural competency is. But I think we have a lot of agreement around this table about what SEL is. We have more frameworks for thinking about it and talking about it, and we just are not similarly clear about, or at least I'm not. So that's where I just get stuck at the top of the page and then kind of fall apart.
And I think you brought up a good point because we don't have a shared working definition, but if you look at a definition of cultural proficiency, if we consider it a continuum, I know we've been interchanging cultural competency and cultural proficiency, but if you look at a widely accepted definition, it means knowing how to learn from other cultures, interacting effectively in a variety of cultural environments, and leaders taking opportunities to increase formal awareness of other cultures and dynamics of difference. And so when you look at the social emotional learning competencies of social awareness, self-awareness, the ability to communicate with others, that's where we're grounding the building of that proficiency in actual skills. Because to say that those are our goals, we still have to do skill building, and so that's where we see social emotional learning when you look at the 5 core competencies of it as leading into cultural proficiency. And I hear what you're saying is we need to make that connection more clear because it's not coming across.
I can only speak for myself.
I hear two things, is that understanding the 5 core competencies of social emotional learning, but then how that connects to building cultural proficiency is what we haven't made clear to everybody.
Yeah, I'm not saying. Oh, sorry. Mr. Carden?
Okay, so it seems like this is our opportunity to sort of set the direction for the goals. So there's two things that I didn't see that I'd like to see reflected, at least under, key activities at some point. But one is the achievement gap and looking at, English language learners, special needs students, and others who, we haven't focused on in our goals for a long time. The other is integrating technology better than we do. So those are two things that I would suggest considering as additional goals, or at least additional objectives, or at least key activities fitting in under some of the objectives. Thanks.
Mr. Hayner?
I just need, the only needs to be made clear. Cultural competency and cultural proficiency are two different things. Are we in agreement with that?
If you think of them as a continuum, and I know there's been discussion,
okay.
and I don't think we want to go into that,
No.
when you look at cultural pre-competence, cultural blindness,
Okay.
stuff, so I think that's where.
I can hear that. One of the things that I don't know whether it's lacking or what, we have had in the goals training for cultural competency with staff. And my understanding that was going to be ongoing. And I don't see that here as one of the continuous goals. Did I miss it?
No, it's here. We think it's here.
You do.
We do. We see it,
Can work on that with the.
yeah, we see it in goal, objective 2.1.
Yeah, if you look at, yes,
2.1.
yes, around professional development.
Quality professional personal learning experience to support implementation of district curriculum using culturally competent, data-driven. That doesn't talk about cultural competency training.
It's number 2 on the activities. You have to keep going
I'll
down.
go
I
down to
think
the
it's
chart.
probably-
I'm sorry, I went looking at the first one.
We've made a very big document for you.
No, you have. Bear with me. Culture, which one? 2 point,
2.1.
That,
Under key activities.
key activities.
Look at key activity number 2.
Create, thank you, workshops culturally competent related to district curriculum.
Again, we have
Okay,
some.
okay.
Again, this is a draft.
I hear you, thank you.
So,
You
I mean,
helped it.
sometimes in some, we worked a lot on the objectives, and I told you during our curriculum leader meeting, we met with the superintendent, and we worked a lot around the objectives, and then we filled in some key activity. Now, some of them are like placeholders, so we have to really go back and look at and craft the language, but the spirit around that is to continue the cultural proficiency training and professional development that's been ongoing this year, which there has been, although you highlighted that the district administrators were trained, there have been, from that, principals have reached out to our consultant, Dr. Hoyt, and have contracted him to come in and work with staff. And so there's been like book studies and things of that nature that are going on. So that is a continuation of the professional development that we've been doing this year.
Rob, once you get through the old man's head, it's a good document. It's just,
Right.
you have to walk me to it sometimes.
No,
Thank
I'm just
you.
saying,
No,
like,
it's there.
I want to stress the fact that this is a work in progress
Right.
and that this is not the final document.
Thank you.
Dr. Seuss?
so just creating modules and workshops doesn't mean that all professionals will be taking those within 5 years, right? So that's what we need to see. 20% of our staff will be trained year 1, 40% year 2, 60% year 3, that kind of sort of detailed understanding. And I have to say, we did have this sort of fight a couple years ago, which about the distinction between cultural proficient training and social emotional learning. And there's obviously a connection, but one is not sufficient for the other, right? So just focusing on social emotional learning, which is crucially important, and I'm really glad that we're doing those steps, is not sufficient by itself.
Right, and so what you highlighted about the evidence about, the percentage of staff that are going to be trained, as you can see, the evidence that demonstrates progress hasn't been filled in, so we can continue to have those discussions about what that's going to look like as we move forward. What are the increments that we're going to make, the progress that we're going to make to get to where all staff has been trained? So that's a very good point.
Okay, Mr. Carden.
So yeah, so we are. I think you're hearing us. So we're having a little difficulty with this 1.2 objective.
Sure.
It may not work for us, okay? So part of my problem is, for example, like the screener. What are you screening for? Are you screening for cultural competency, or are you screening for SEL? If you're screening for SEL, then, I mean, maybe you should be screening for both. But I think there are two separate things, and certainly social emotional competency increases your cultural competency, but they're sort of different things. And I know they're related, but I don't really see them conveniently being lumped in all together without sort of losing some of the focus on each of them. So, just my comment.
Okay, so before anyone else talks, since it seems like I've derailed, I mean, you folks are doing really well on time until I got here.
We were doing great.
Superintendent's report.
So two people came back, we were
Ready
doing
for the
fine.
I know, you were like,
Superintendent's report a while
racing
ago.
through it.
We
and
should have
then
just
here I
stayed
am.
awake.
There's an important discussion.
Okay, I'm not disagreeing, it's important discussion. And, but it sounded like there was already decision made to discuss this further sometime, somewhere. Could someone tell me what it was?
Yeah, it's CIAH.
Well, the CIA meeting, yeah, but it's not clear. We're talking about, so right now the agenda is to talk about the cultural competency goal in particular, because there's people that are interested in that, from the superintendent's diversity task force, and then the goal process. That's all. We were only going to talk about those two items related to the goals, the cultural competency goal and the process. We can expand it, there's new business. So.
Okay, if people had other thoughts about additional goals, as Mr. Carden added things that he felt that hadn't been addressed and he would like to have considered, could they bring them to you? Could they forward them to you so that they get onto the table? So that we don't have to keep sitting here until everyone's got their.
In fact, I might just write the whole thing for everybody and tell you what I'm going to do.
Okay, Mr. Hayner.
I also
No,
asked,
no, I'm kidding.
I also asked CIAA to, Dr. Bodie and I were discussing the alignment of this and the superintendent's goals. Start that discussion maybe there,
Okay,
because that's usually where it gets shifted to.
yes, I would agree with that. And
Thank
I
you.
would like, just finally, I would also like to echo especially the achievement gap, and considering that as somewhere in the goals. I think that is an important thing. And in past, it has impacted both what's happened in the classroom and future testing outcomes. So I think it's worth looking at, and it's helpful to our students as
Absolutely.
it trickles down. So
Absolutely.
are we all set? Can I move on?
All we have left is
Okay.
superintendent's report. We did the committees, we did the consent.
Okay, so then we move,
We didn't do an executive session.
okay, now we're back to the superintendent's report.
We have an executive session.
Dr. I'm sorry.
Just, okay. Well, there are a number,
Can I say where we were first?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'll let Dr. Bodie chime in, but first, I never had a chance to say, so Dr. Bodie and I are sorry we were late. We were at the Touchdown Club's annual awards dinner for the Ostergren Award, which is, what are the criteria? The top student athletes, male and female. I'm not sure if it's senior class or if it's.
it's senior class.
Is it
It's
senior class? Yes. Yeah, we
Yeah.
didn't get a stay for the rest of it, so I don't know the rest. We just saw the very start of it.
Yeah,
But-
They're chosen as exemplary student athlete, both for their academics and their leadership on a team, and their good character.
So it was a very nice event. I would have liked to have stayed longer, not that I might
Did you have
be-
any pasta? Did you get to eat?
We didn't
We
get to
did.
eat. We talked and ran.
That's unfair. That's
So,
Some
we missed
former
out.
chairs stay for the full meal.
I stay for the, I stay.
Wait a little bit.
yeah,
I stayed
okay.
for long enough
No,
to at
we
least
did.
get something to eat, yeah.
Anyway, okay, so now moving on to the superintendent's report.
Well, having a few things. I must acknowledge that, as I said earlier, then there's been some reports in the newspapers and on TV about the unfortunate event here at the high school last week. And I just want to acknowledge it, since we're meeting for the first time. There's not really much I can say. We're on an ongoing investigation. But I do want to acknowledge the students' at the high school who were upset by it and who wrote many notes of support that these doesn't represent our values and doesn't represent the values of our community. And I think that the leadership that they showed, the compassion and the ability to express what they thought that the values were here, I think was quite commendable. I also want to thank our custodians. They had a very tough morning that day in facing what they had to face, and they did just a terrific job because they knew how important it was to start school that day and as best as possible. So thank you to them, and then just to the administration and the teachers who were very supportive through that whole process, and to all of you, the Human Rights Commission. I think this, while how unfortunate the event was, it provided an opportunity for people to come together and articulate, what we believe in and who we are as a community. And so actually it ties very much into this, because the one thing that I was talking to some of the coaches about, before the dinner was just how wonderful our students are. They love coaching them. They find them just to be respectful and hardworking, great team spirit. So that's the thing people should know about Arlington High School and Arlington students, is just really how special they are. And that those were actually words said by our coaches. And I can tell you our teachers say the same thing. So it's a joy to teach them, and it's just disappointing to the whole community when something like this happens. Mm-hmm. Oh. But we also had some very good news in terms of the U.S. News and World Report rankings. I think Arlington High School needs to be commended for the hard work, but it's not even just the high school. When you have this level of achievement and proficiency that's nationally ranked and ranked in the state, this is something that is due to all the efforts of everybody in the district working together in a collegial, coherent, and supportive way for our students. For those that have not seen the rankings, Arlington High School was ranked number 9 in the state. And, there's been 19s and 21s and 12s, but, it just continuously moves forward. And, kudos to the teachers and staff and the students. But the thing that is changing, and it's even going to change on the accountability ratings in the state, is the acknowledgement. We talk about an achievement gap. The acknowledgement that it's they're looking at, in this particular ranking, it's a 4-step process. The first 2 steps determine whether students are performing better than statistically expected in the state, and we are, and whether minority students in the school are performing at or better than the state average for minority students, and we are. The focus we have done on closing the achievement gap over these many years is showing, very much so, in our metrics. And then there's a requirement about surpassing certain graduation benchmarks, and then the final step was to determine college readiness. So I think it's a proud day for the Arlington High School and for the whole district. As I said to all of the teachers and staff in the district, this is everybody. Everybody's working coherently, and the support we give for our kids that need even more support than because they're struggling on many levels. So that was all good news. I also want to acknowledge the musicians in the high school. They had a fabulous Pops concert last weekend. It's just, every year, it's amazing, the level of talent. And I know it takes a lot of work to get to that level, but they did. In fact, I got some, notes from members of the community saying what a gift it was to have this kind of performance available for people that live here. Congratulations to the middle school for their great play last week, Bye Bye Birdie. And kindergarten numbers. Ms. Morgan's one of her favorite.
Here.
We're at 542 in May. So we are Yes. This is good news on one hand. We have, a lot of people have a lot of confidence in our school system and want to be here. Of course, this is going to mean that we need to take a look at this in the budget subcommittee meeting, and at this table, the classrooms that we may need. I think that since the last time we met, we know we need another classroom at the elementary level, and possibly two, if this trend continues over the next month or so. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is that the after-school program, I don't think I mentioned this, that at least in the programs that we have at Hardy and at Thompson, and the immersion program at Brackett, we are increasing each program by 20 students next year and another 20 the following year. And at the Brackett immersion, we'll go 10 students next year and another 10 the following year. So we're increasing capacity. Hopefully, it will put more of a bigger dent in our wait list. And I know that Dr. Seuss is going to have a meeting with all of the people running our after-school programs to talk more about this. Mm-hmm. That's it.
Did you want to say something about the CPR review?
Oh, yes, I do. Well, actually, we want to say something about the CPR review, but I'm going to let Dr. McNeil say this.
So I'm proud to say that all of our CPR corrective action plans, we are able to meet the requirements, and our final report is that we are no longer have to turn in progress reports because we've met our goal of meeting all the requirements. So that includes special education, the civil rights, and in each one of the reports. So I'm very happy, and I thank Allison and Carla Brusacy, our director of ELL, for all their hard work around that area.
Great. Okay. Ms. Morgan?
Just about the kindergarten, because it's on my mind, because I have a kindergartner, but I went to the orientation at Stratton this morning, and when we're talking about kindergarten and we're talking about after school and we're talking about anxiety, and those are by and large the Venn diagram of the people who are very stressed about after school and the people who are stressed about 540 kindergartners. There's a lot of overlap between those groups of folks. So they're seeing large numbers. There's lots of kids on these lists as people move through these orientations. They're hearing it from teachers. We're hearing it. And so I think that we've done a really great job of being really transparent about the numbers and what we're looking at. And I think that Dr. Bodie has been fantastic about making it very clear to the community that this is something that she is watching very, very closely, and that we are going to plan accordingly. And I just want to encourage us to continue to do that, because it is, as a school committee member, the numbers are, they're significant. We've never had this many kids in May before, by not tens of kids, but lots, and as a parent, it's anxiety producing, because once your numbers get high, you eventually at certain places reach a breaking point, right? And we're probably potentially going to see that at more schools than we have before. So just continuing to be mindful of that. And this is it's a stressed population, because their kids are coming to school and they're worried that they don't have an after school spot, and they're seeing all of these kids, and they're hearing as they're coming to orientation, there are all of these kids, which is great, but it's really scary if one of those kids is your kid, especially if it's your first kid.
Do you have specific ideas that you wanted to suggest, or are you just bringing up the idea to say that this needs to be thought forward?
We make the decision, once you make the decision to, if it comes to adding a section someplace, and to get that decision out as quickly as possible, as clearly as possible, continuing to, I don't doubt that that's going to happen. I just think it's going to be really important to communicate it, and communicate it to our teachers, because we don't want them to see these numbers and think, man, I really don't want 25, 26, 27 kindergartners, because we don't, as a district, have a cap right? We don't, right? We don't have a set policy cap. So, you know, it gets a little scary when you start to think, oh, could it really happen? Like, could we really do that? And so there's nothing to like fall back on and say, well, we've never had a kindergarten class of, you know, in the last 5 years of 28 kids, right? But, you know, it's where it gets scary is when it's on those like squidgy lines, and that's when people get stressed, I think.
Right.
So I think just continuing the really good communication that has happened, once decisions start to be made, communicating those as clearly and quickly as possible so that people know what's going to happen. And
So, thank you. So, I will say that right now, we have kindergarten class sizes from 19 to 23. We don't have class sizes that are exceeding those numbers. And that's the kind of,
we have class sizes, oh, sorry, go ahead.
we're really watching this, and, you know, to the extent that we can use buffer zones to help in that, so we can create a classroom. I will say that we usually try to have a very high percentage of first choices on buffers. This year is it's going to be a little bit different than that, mainly because of just the number of additional classrooms we might need. But yes, we can, once principals know this, they should get that out to their parent community, and so they know that there's going to be another classroom there. And we are going to have 3 at Pierce again next year. And we're probably going to have 1, possibly 2 more classrooms that are going to be additionals.
Ms. Morgan?
There were 74 kids on the kindergarten list at Stratton this morning and 2 people who came in who weren't on the list, right? So that to me is 76. So when I divide that by 3, that gets to be, you know, that's not 23 or 19, right? So I'm just saying that this, what I think is important that we recognize as a body, and that as these meetings start to roll out, right, and as people start to come to the school, they all of a sudden start to have a lot more information about what's happening, right? And so those questions I think are going to come more frequently, which is fair, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm really confident that we have the answers to them. You know, like I don't think we know precisely what's going to happen, but I feel confident that it's going to be okay. You know, I just want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to alleviate whatever anxiety people feel when they start to see that happen. I presume it's not just happening at the school that I go to, right?
No.
No.
Not. Well, the class sizes are creeping up, and the thing that's challenging in this is that when it's been helpful to be able to use buffer zones, but at the same time, I appreciate it when people say I want to be in a wait list, because what can happen, in fact, it's already happened once, is that people can be shifted. You know, if you want to go back to your first choice, that can work, and we may be seeing more of that as we go forward. To the extent that we can, both in terms of space and the cost of teachers, be able to consolidate a little bit is helpful. And that's what we're trying to do. But, you know, you have to actively respond to when people register, and that's the thing that makes it a little tricky, because it's an ongoing process.
I guess one other question would be, thinking ahead to next year, if during this process you realize that there would be minor tweaks to our policies that could make it easier, like extending the date another week before you have to decide, or I don't know, I'm guessing here, but if there is, I'm sure that we would be more than happy to discuss them. So.
Thank you.
Similar, I know we've talked about this before, but does it make sense to expand buffer zones? And I know that's something you're aware of, but we probably need a year to roll that out. So we want to be thinking, is next year the year that we think about that? Can we wait?
Right.
Was there more superintendent report?
No?
Nope. Oh, okay.
But you have other people want to say something.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Schlickman?
There are a couple of things I want to emphasize in this. Is unfortunately, it seems that due to the incident at the high school last week, the U.S. News report ranking seems to be underplayed to a certain extent, at least in this community. We beat Lexington, we beat Winchester, we beat Acton Boxborough, we beat Belmont, we beat all the usual suspects. Lexington, that's the first one I mentioned. It's always good to beat Lexington. But, the rankings are subjective, and if you change the formula, it'll, top schools adjust, so it's just a recognition of what a good job we're doing. But people buy the magazine, people look at the website, and if we think that 5 whatever in the kindergarten enrollment is tough right now, the more that we do well, the more that people pick up those rankings and see that Arlington High School is at the top of the list, we're going to keep on having this challenge. So thank you for facing the challenge, and thank you to everybody who works in the system who's produced the wonderful results that's seen every day, not just on the things that they can quantify, but things like the musical and the art that we see on the walls and all the experiences that our children have.
Passing the CPR review, too.
Mr. Hayner? No. I wondered if you wanted to talk about the redoing the enrollment, or updating the enrollment study.
Yes.
Yeah.
We are going to do an update on the enrollment study. That's really necessary. And I have to say, our own projections weren't that far off. When we did our straight line, we based it on the number of births, and that was at 571, as you pointed out. We might be approaching 550, 560 as we go forward on this. So we may not, our own projections weren't too off the mark, honestly, on this one. So, yes, but we are going to do that.
Mr. Cardin?
Yeah, so I'm not certain that going back to the same demographer is the right choice. He's been so far off. I mean, I would advocate for looking at, possibly thinking about a different provider. I understand he has his methodologies, which are secret, but he's just been far off. So I'm not sure of the value. I mean, certainly it would at least give us updated numbers, which is better than what his old numbers are, but I don't know.
Mr. Hayner?
I think one of the things that, and I understand it about not counting out-of-district students and stuff, but those out-of-district students may come back. And we're still required to have a house for them.
Yeah.
So maybe 2 sets of numbers of looking at both. I don't know. But I agree with Mr. Cardin. I think we should look, we may end up with the same demographer, but I think we should look at choices.
Okay, so it sounded like you did all the subcommittee
we did.
reports?
Yep.
We're good.
Okay, woo. Then we move into
Executive session.
executive session.
I didn't do any of that building ones.
Oh, building
Oh, do you
updates,
want to do
yeah.
building updates? Okay, yes,
There's,
please.
well, the high school is moving forward. We continue to have our architect look at, bring back information around the 4 options that we're looking at. But I think it's important to remind people that we're really looking at the big decision, which is, are we going to do a brand new, or are we going to do a renovation addition? So one of the big issues in both of these is phasing, and we continue to look at what that might look like in terms of making sure that the education of our students continues seamlessly during this process. But that's moving forward. I will remind people there's going to be another community forum, which is going to be on June 4th. And it's an opportunity to, again, hear all of the updated information as to where we are in the project, and, you know, to give us your thoughts on it as well. Because as we go through this process, certainly next year, there'll be more opportunities. We go through schematic as well for community input. Things are moving forward with both the Hardy addition. We're probably going to need to extend it one more week beyond what the turnover date was going to be, but that's going to be fine. We were not going to move into Hardy until the Christmas break, the holiday break. So a few more days would be all right. Hopefully it doesn't keep creeping up for other reasons, but right now it certainly seems to be quite doable. And then with respect to Gibbs, we've had, you know, it's doing well. In fact, I went by it today. They're putting up the fence and the wall in front of the building, and all the windows have been, of course, they've been in for a while. But the expectation is that we are definitely going to, you know, have a turnover of the building to the town, probably late July 31st or certainly early August, which will give us time to do the move-in of all of what we need to do. So that's going well.
Okay, great. So we're going into executive session?
Do we need to do consent?
Oh.
We did that already.
They did that while we were gone.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're like, okay,
did the easy
so,
stuff.
All right. I think we should have executive. Yeah.
okay, so, and we'll just adjourn from there.
We'll adjourn
Yes,
from there
okay,
with no
so,
decisions, right?
Okay, so we're going to move into executive session to conduct strategy and sessions in preparation for negotiations with union and/or non-union personnel or contract negotiations with union and/or non-union in which have held in an open meeting may have a detrimental effect, and conduct strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation in which if held in an open meeting may have a detrimental effect. Collective bargaining may also be conducted. May I have a motion?
So move.
Second?
Second.
Okay, this is a roll call vote. Mr. Hayner? Oh,
Aye.
we'll exit only for the purposes of adjournment. So,
Aye.
Mr. Hayner? Ms. Morgan?
Aye.
Mr. Thielman?
Aye.
Mr. Schlickman?
Yes.
Dr.
Yes.
Yes.
Gordon? And myself, yes. So
The yeses.
Couple ayes
Four
and-
yeses, one executive
So-
session.
we're now in executive session. Thank you very much.